In Baltimore, New Year's Eve kicks off with excitement. People are partying and counting down to midnight, but the vibe quickly shifts when gunshots ring out, throwing the city into chaos. Rookie cop Eleanor Falco gets a call from a diner owner about a drunk guy causing a scene. While she's deciding if it's worth her time, an urgent call about a shooting changes everything. She races to the scene to console the victim's wife and kid, then jumps into the investigation. Teaming up with another officer, she uses a laser tool to trace the gunfire to a nearby apartment. Just as they're about to check it out, the place suddenly explodes. Chaos breaks loose as they evacuate the building. Eleanor instructs other officers to snap photos of everyone leaving, hoping to catch the suspect. Braving the smoke, she heads upstairs to help her colleagues break into the apartment, but ends up passing out near a window. When she comes to, a fellow officer is putting an oxygen mask on her, and a paramedic steps in, insisting she take it easy. Downstairs, Detective Jack McKenzie, who's been working with her, updates the lead investigator. Turns out, the apartment belonged to a Norwegian guy who got it as debt repayment and never even lived there. While they're processing this, a firework goes off nearby, startling everyone. The city council decides to cancel the rest of the fireworks. Eleanor notices a police dog barking at a restroom and flags it to the team leader, who orders the whole restroom to be taken as evidence. He then tells her to leave the scene. The next morning, Chief Jackson announces that FBI Special Agent Lamar is joining the case. Lamar addresses the team, explaining that the killer is no amateur. 29 people dead, and not a single trace left behind. He warns them not to assume the suspect fits the typical mass shooter stereotype. Eleanor, serving coffee during the briefing, overhears Lamar arguing with Jesse Capleton, a higher-up more worried about the governor's image than catching the killer. Later, in the pantry, Eleanor mentions to a colleague that the killer seems more about revenge than pure evil. Lamar overhears and asks her to elaborate. She suggests the killer might stop once their goal is achieved, but there's no guarantee. Lamar seems impressed and introduces himself. The following day, Chief Jackson tells Eleanor that Lamar wants to meet her at a cafe. She finds Lamar arguing with Capleton, who insists on keeping public beaches open despite the threat. Once Capleton leaves, Lamar invites Eleanor to join him for coffee. He praises her knack for profiling and invites her, along with Jack, to join his team as liaisons between the police and FBI. At the station briefing, the only lead they have is to track down painters who worked on the exploded apartment 2 years ago. Frustrated by unnecessary interference from counterterrorism teams, Lamar reminds everyone he's in charge. He reluctantly signs off on Capleton's no-curfew policy and reveals that the weapon used was an old M21 sniper rifle, making the case even trickier. Eleanor suggests looking into arsenal keepers who might know about such weapons, and Lamar assigns the team to follow that lead. On the way to the morgue, Eleanor notices Lamar seems irritated with the other teams meddling in the case. Jack explains that this is common and often slows things down. At the morgue, they're shaken by the sheer number of victims. Discussing the killer's profile, they agree it's likely someone with military or elite sports training. Eleanor adds that the killings feel impulsive, lacking a clear pattern. Lamar points out the killer's intent isn't to cause suffering, but to disrupt society, evident by the precise, single-bullet shots. Their discussion is cut short by a report about the killer's location. At the scene, Agent Frank Grabber is in charge. A kid in the apartment has locked himself in, threatening anyone who comes near. Lamar considers it a risky move since they don't even know if the kid is armed. As they watch, the team breaks in and the kid starts throwing things before smashing a window. Lamar is visibly frustrated with Grabber and Capleton for their rash decisions and refusal to admit their mistake. Back at the station, the team starts questioning the painters who worked on the flat years ago. One of them, Rodney Lang, even brings his baby along since his wife is at work. Despite their efforts, none of the painters offer any helpful information. Eleanor eventually takes the baby outside as the crying distracts everyone. Later, a lab report reveals the killer is vegan, but Lamar gets upset when Eleanor doesn't bring the report to him directly. While walking home, he catches up to apologize for snapping at her and invites her to dinner to go over new evidence. Initially, she thinks he's flirting, but he quickly clarifies he's married. During the drive, Lamar vents about feeling stuck because of Capleton's political games, which he fears could cost him his job. He also mentions knowing about Eleanor's past rejection from the FBI. This leads to a heavy conversation where he questions her reasons for becoming a cop, her honesty during the FBI interview, and her personal struggles. The moment gets emotional as Eleanor breaks down, showing him scars she inflicted on herself in the past. Eleanor opens up about her struggles with depression, and Lamar encourages her to channel those experiences to better understand what drives the killer. Meanwhile, at a local mall, an unknown man sneaks around. He grabs some clothes, washes up in a restroom sink, and picks leftover veggies off cafeteria tables. When security catches him and asks to check his bag, he refuses and just says he wants to go home. When they insist, the man pulls out a gun and starts shooting. Eleanor, who is out investigating in an antique gun shop, gets called to the scene. She joins the team in the security room, trying to get a clear view of the man's face from the footage, but it's no use. She notices something peculiar. He only picks up vegetables from the tables, which matches the lab report about the killer being a vegan. The footage shows him killing the guards and a woman who taunted him, and then going after responding officers. Eleanor and Lamar begin piecing together the killer's methods, thinking he might have a background involving precise shooting skills. When he uses grenades to take down more officers outside the mall, the chaos escalates. Lamar spots Seaton arriving in a helicopter and quickly tells Eleanor and Jack to search for the man's discarded shirt. The team later sifts through a massive pile of trash at a landfill where mall garbage is dumped, looking for the shirt. Back at the station, Grabber and Capleton consider airing footage of the killer on a popular TV show, hoping someone will recognize him. Lamar is against the idea, but his boss, Nathan Bowen, pressures him to go along with it. As the debate continues, Jack returns with the shirt they were hunting for. The team reviews new data, learning that the killer may have suffered serious head trauma in the past. When the mall footage airs on TV, the host urges viewers to call in with any information. Among the calls, one person claims to be the killer, describing himself as part of a shadowy militia. The officers trace the caller's location and rush to the scene, although Lamar and Eleanor doubt he's the real deal. When they arrive, the supposed killer is at a corner store with some friends. Civilians are evacuated, but Eleanor struggles to convince an elderly man to leave. The situation spirals out of control when the pranksters realize they're being targeted. A shootout erupts, leaving most of the men dead. One officer tases a guy, who confesses that the whole shadow militia claim was just a joke. The failed operation sparks backlash. Lamar gets grilled about what went wrong. Though he insists it wasn't his plan, as the team leader, he takes the fall. The incident also shines a harsh spotlight on Eleanor's past rejection from the FBI, but Lamar defends her, arguing she has the potential to be great. Still, the fiasco costs him his job. Afterward, Lamar, Eleanor, and Jack share drinks, but Eleanor is weighed down with guilt and dark thoughts. That night, she confronts Rodney, a painter connected to the bomb department. She accuses him of outsourcing the work to someone else based on his financial records. Under pressure, Rodney admits he hired Dean, an ex-convict who had turned vegan after working in a slaughterhouse. The team gets a sketch of Dean and checks out several slaughterhouses. At one, a woman recognizes him and shares that he was bullied at work, which led to an accidental death for which Dean was blamed. He served 2 years in prison as a result. Eleanor uncovers more about his background, including his father's history as a shooting instructor, Dean's familiarity with antique weapons, and a childhood gunshot injury that caused his head trauma. They visit Dean's mother's house, but don't have his contact information. Eleanor suggests calling Jack for backup, but Lamar advises against it. When they arrive, Mrs. Poss, Dean's mom, is reluctant to help, but she agrees after they assure her they want to bring Dean in alive. She explains that Dean became deeply angry and withdrawn after a tragic shooting incident involving his father. Eleanor notices a cabin nearby, but is caught off guard when Dean shoots Lamar from there. Panicking, she convinces Mrs. Poss to grab their guns and phones as a show of peace to Dean. Mrs. Poss goes outside, threatening to harm herself if Dean doesn't cooperate. Touched by this, Dean emerges with a rifle, then puts it away and takes a handgun to talk with Eleanor inside. Eleanor tries to connect with Dean, sharing her own struggles. Eventually, Dean opens up and asks her to kill him after he falls asleep beside his mother. Though she agrees, the arrival of police sirens makes Dean feel betrayed. He ties Eleanor up in the cabin and goes outside, shooting at the officers. Desperate, Eleanor pleads with him to stop, finally managing to hug him as the officers close in. She promises to help him if he surrenders, but Dean detonates nearby bombs instead. In the chaos, she bites him, causing him to bleed. Dean escapes, but is later found by the police, weakened and leaning against a wall. They shoot him multiple times. Eleanor frees herself with Jack's help and later meets Nathan Bowen in his office. Bowen offers her a classified deal to cover up the operation's failures in exchange for a desk job as an intelligence analyst. Eleanor refuses, insisting on speaking out. Bowen counters that her actions with Lamar were not fully authorized, forcing her to reconsider. She negotiates for a posthumous Medal of Valor for Lamar, which Bowen agrees to. Instead of accepting an analyst position, she demands to become a special agent, a request that is ultimately approved. The story wraps up with Eleanor shaking hands with Capleton and heading home, reflecting on Lamar's words about making a difference. Thank you so much for watching.